There is a room on the top floor of the Desert Inn Hotel in Las Vegas. The year is 1966. The curtains are sealed with black tape so that no light can enter. The carpets have not been cleaned in months. The man inside has not cut his hair or his fingernails in years. He weighs less than 100 pounds. He does not wear clothes. He does not speak to anyone directly. And yet, this man was once considered the most powerful private citizen in the United States. He had broken aviation world records. He had produced films that made Hollywood hold its breath. He had dated the most famous women in the world. He had built an empire that stretched from the Nevada desert to the skies above the Pacific. And then, quietly, without announcement, he disappeared. This is the story of Howard Hughes.
The rise,
The obsession, the silence, and the end. Howard Robard Hughes Jr. was born on December 24, 1905, in Houston, Texas. His father, Howard Hughes Sr., was not a man who waited for opportunity. He invented a drill bit, the kind that could cut through rock that no other tool could touch.
he patented it.
He licensed it to every oil company in America. And the money came, and kept coming. Howard Jr. grew up knowing he would inherit something large. What he did not know was that he would lose both parents before he turned 19. His mother died of complications from surgery in 1922. He was 16. His father died of a heart attack 2 years later.
He was 18.
He was, at that moment, the sole heir to the Hughes Tool Company. He was also, by every account, completely alone. He bought out his relatives' shares. He took full control. He was 18 years old, and he was already a millionaire. But money was never what he wanted. What Howard Hughes wanted was to be extraordinary. In 1925, he moved to Los Angeles. He wanted to make movies, not because he loved cinema, though he did, but because films were the largest stage in the world, and Howard Hughes intended to stand on it. His early films were modest, but in 1930, he released Hell's Angels, a war epic he had been obsessing over for 3 years, spending what would today be tens of millions of dollars to get it right. The film was a sensation. Hughes had personally flown several of the aircraft sequences himself. He had crashed a plane during production and nearly died. He did not care. The crash had only made him want to fly more. In Hollywood, he moved through the world like a man who understood that access was its own form of power. He dated actresses. He produced films. He invested, acquired, controlled. His relationship with Katharine Hepburn lasted 4 years. She was the only person who ever said, publicly, that she believed she could have married him. She also said he was the most complicated man she had ever known. By the mid-1930s, the movies were no longer enough. Howard Hughes had become obsessed with aviation, not as a hobby, as a mission. In September 1935, he set a new world airspeed record, 352 miles per hour. He had designed the plane himself. In July 1938, he flew around the world in just over 91 hours, shattering the previous record by nearly 4 days. New York greeted him with a ticker tape parade. He was 32 years old. He was already a legend. But the war changed things. Hughes' aircraft won major military contracts during World War II. And in 1947, he was called before the United States Senate to answer accusations of war profiteering. It was at this hearing that Hughes arrived with a weapon. The H for Hercules, the largest aircraft ever built. 8 engines. A wingspan of 320 feet. Made entirely of wood. The press had been calling it the Spruce Goose.
A folly.
A joke. On November 2, 1947, with journalists and senators watching, Howard Hughes climbed into the cockpit and flew it. Just once. Just over a mile. Just high enough to prove every critic wrong. It was the last time he would ever truly win. The first crack had come a year earlier. On July 7, 1946, Howard Hughes was test flying a military reconnaissance aircraft called the XF-11 over Beverly Hills. The propeller malfunctioned. He went down. The plane destroyed 3 houses before it stopped. Hughes survived, but his chest had been crushed. Several ribs broken. His left lung collapsed. Doctors did not believe he would live through the night.
He lived.
But the pain was severe and ongoing. And the codeine they gave him in the hospital, he never stopped taking it. People who knew him before the crash and after said he was not the same man. The obsessive tendencies he had always had, the need for control, the rituals, the fear of contamination, they accelerated. He began to spend hours washing his hands. He began to give detailed written instructions about how objects should be handled, which staff could touch what, and in what order, and with how many tissues. The man who had once touched the sky with his bare hands was terrified of germs. In 1966, Howard Hughes arrived in Las Vegas. He did not check in under his name. He did not walk through the lobby. He was carried on a stretcher through a service entrance in the middle of the night and taken directly to the top floor of the Desert Inn. He had not been seen publicly in years. The curtains were sealed. The room was kept at a specific temperature, not for comfort, but because he had decided that temperature was the variable most likely to carry disease. And yet, from that sealed room, he ran an empire.
He bought the Desert Inn.
Then another casino. Then another. Then an airport. Then an airline. Then a television station. At one point, Howard Hughes owned more of Las Vegas than anyone else in history. He was conducting billion-dollar transactions through handwritten memos delivered by aides who were not allowed to make eye contact with him. His instructions were meticulous, pages long, about the most ordinary things: how to open a can of soup, how to move a chair, how many times to fold a paper towel. His chief aide, Robert Maheu, ran the empire's daily operations. Maheu worked for Hughes for a decade and met him face to face exactly once. By the early 1970s, even the aides closest to Hughes were not sure he was still alive. He had left Las Vegas in 1970, again in the middle of the night, and moved to the Bahamas. Then Nicaragua. Then Canada. Then London. Then again. He was being moved like cargo, always at night, always on stretchers, always in secret. The press ran stories about whether he was dead. A man named Clifford Irving claimed to have written Hughes's authorized biography, a complete fabrication, and nearly got away with it because no one could reach Hughes to ask him. The man himself, meanwhile, had become skeletal. He weighed at various points between 90 and 100 pounds. His fingernails had grown into long curving spirals. His hair fell past his shoulders. He watched movies on a projector, sometimes the same film dozens of times in a row. He ate almost nothing. He spoke to almost no one. He had once held the world in his hands. Now he was afraid to touch a doorknob. In April 1976, Howard Hughes was in Acapulco, Mexico. He had been there for some time, in another sealed room in another top floor with another set of drawn curtains. On April 5th, his aides realized he had deteriorated beyond what they could manage. They decided to fly him to Houston, back to Texas, where he was born, for medical treatment. He never made it to the hospital. Howard Hughes died at 1:27 p.m. on April 5, 1976, aboard the private jet, somewhere over the state of Texas. He was 70 years old. When the medical examiner examined his body, they found broken-off needles in his arms from years of injections. His teeth were rotting. His kidneys had failed. He was severely malnourished. The FBI had to use fingerprints to confirm his identity because no one had photographed him in so long that there was genuine uncertainty about whether the body was actually Howard Hughes, the richest man in America, and no one was sure it was him. What came next was a legal war. Hughes had left no will. Or rather, dozens of wills appeared, almost all of them fraudulent. The battle over his estate lasted years. Eventually, the money went to the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, a foundation he had created decades earlier, which today is one of the largest private funders of biological research in the world. The man who died alone on a plane, weighing less than a child, afraid of everything, had also designed aircraft that changed aviation, had built a medical foundation that has funded Nobel Prize winners, had produced films that are still watched, had built an aircraft so large it has never been surpassed in wingspan. The question that has followed Howard Hughes across history is not what he achieved. It is what he might have been, if the fear had never come. He had everything: the money, the fame, the talent, the power. And he spent the last 30 years of his life running from all of it. That is the price of a mind that never learned to rest. That is the story of Howard Hughes.